In this edition of Time to Travel, we visit one of the most iconic sites in London, the Tower of London. Construction began on the White Tower sometime in the mid to late 1070s under the direction of Norman King William the Conqueror. William wanted a stronghold to protect he and his Norman knights from the recently subjugated Anglo-Saxons. The tower was meant to project power on a grand scale. It was also meant to impress and intimidate. For the next 300 years, subsequent kings added towers and curtain walls until the complex was expanded to the 18 acres we see today. 2 million visitors come to the tower each year. Many come by way of the Thames River on boat tours. Guided tours begin every 30 minutes. They're led by elaborately costumed yeoman warders, also known as beefeaters. They offer a stirring and often humorous interpretation of history.
Bending down and picking up the severed and still bleeding head, he turned to the assembled crowd. He held it aloft for all to see. He then proclaimed, "Behold, the head of a traitor! So die all traitors! God save the king!" Hey! Can you see the head? No, you can't. It's in that hand.
There are 25 yeoman warders at the tower. All are retired military who served at least 22 years on active duty. One of the benefits of being a yeoman warder is they and their families get to live in the tower. There are about 120 full-time residents today. Visitors are welcome to wander about on their own or use audio guides. But for the very best experience, the Yeoman Warder Tour is well worth the time. They take about an hour, after which you're free to go wherever you wish.
Over there now is the newest building.
Visitors pass over the causeway that once spanned the moat to the Bayward Tower. The tower is equipped with state-of-the-art defenses, including 2 spiked portcullises that could be dropped to seal off the tower. The tower also had murder holes used to pour boiling oil on invaders below. A few steps through the tower is the Traitor's Gate, where prisoners were rowed in from the Thames. This is how the condemned Queen Anne Boleyn arrived in 1536. Ironically, the timber-frame building above the gate was constructed by her husband, King Henry VIII, just a few years earlier in preparation for her coronation. The tower was a royal residence, but was never that popular as a palace. It has also served as the Royal Mint, an armory, storehouse, cannon factory, and was even a menagerie with lions, an elephant, and a polar bear, kept there until the mid-1800s when the London Zoo was created. The tower's most famous or infamous manifestation has been that of a prison and a place for royal intrigue and murder. In 1238, King Henry III took refuge in the tower as he fled from rebellious barons. In 1381, the tower was overrun by peasants in a bloody revolt over taxes. The Archbishop of Canterbury was taken from the tower and beheaded on nearby Tower Hill. From the Traitor's Gate, you pass under the Bloody Tower, where in 1483 the 12- and 9-year-old sons of Edward IV were taken on orders of their uncle. He had the heirs declared illegitimate, so he could assume the throne as King Richard III. The children disappeared. In 1674, the bodies of 2 young boys were found sealed up in the White Tower. The remains were reburied in Westminster Abbey. Sir Walter Raleigh was also held prisoner in the Bloody Tower. King Henry VIII left perhaps the most bloody imprint on the tower. He had many political opponents imprisoned, tortured, and killed, including those who opposed his break with the Roman Catholic Church, most notably Sir Thomas More. Most executions took place outside of the tower on Tower Hill, but there were 10 executions on the green inside the tower, including the execution of 3 queens, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII and mother of the future Queen Elizabeth I, Catherine Howard, the 5th of Henry's wives, and the third queen was 16-year-old Lady Jane Grey, who reigned for just 9 days. They and hundreds of others are buried in the Chapel Royal, just steps from the place of execution, now marked with a crystal pillow.
Now, you mustn't be confused with the public execution site, which I described earlier, outside the tower up on Tower Hill. To be executed here, you ought to be a friend of the king. Because the first to be executed here in 1536 was Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. She was held here for the last 18 days of her life on charges of incest and adultery with her brother and for making fun of the king's clothes. She was tried and found guilty, but because she was frightened of the block and the axe, she was beheaded in a French fashion by means of a double-handed, double-edged sword. Now, as she knelt on the scaffold with her head upward, she looked up at the French executioner in his black mask. He said, "Mon Dieu, 'tis bad luck. She looks at me." She was slapped, her head turned, he pulled a sword out from beneath the straw, and with one swipe, he took off her head. He then bent down, and quickly picking up her severed and bleeding head, he turned to the assembled crowd. He held it aloft for all to see. There were gasps from the assembled crowd. Not cheering, there were louder gasps from the assembled crowd. And the reason is, as they looked at Anne Boleyn's bleeding head, they noticed that her lips were moving in prayer and her eyes were still gazing all around the crowd. He was that quick.
The guided tour ends in the chapel, which is still used for regular services. On Sunday, visitors are welcome to join the congregation for worship. The crown jewels are kept under guard at the Tower in the Waterloo Barracks. Photography is not allowed. Visitors walk through the jewel room, where they see all of the coronation regalia, crowns, swords, ceremonial maces, orbs, and scepters. The White Tower is now a museum devoted to arms and armor. Visitors can also tour the Fusiliers Museum, dedicated to the regiment that guards the crown jewels. Outside the White Tower, you'll see the famous Tower Ravens. Legend has it that as long as the ravens are in the tower, it and the kingdom will stand. There are 7 well-cared-for ravens, and just to make sure they stay put, each has had one wing clipped. The Tower of London is incredible on many levels. It's a living embodiment of English history and a great place to take time to travel.
Now, ladies, let me tell you, there's a wonderful